Oh, hello. You all snuck in. I was posting everything live on Facebook, and everybody snuck in on me here on Zoom. My apologies. I didn't see you all were here. Hello and happy Tuesday. Welcome to another ConnectWise Tuesday. Very happy to have you all here with us today and taking some time to invest in yourselves as well as your professional knowledge in ConnectWise. So we are back to our first Tuesday of the month, which is very exciting, which also means that we are going to be working on ConnectWise Manage. So if you're here for Automate or Sell, our focus really is Manage today, but I highly encourage you, stick around if you're using Manage, learn some new stuff. We were working with a team of people last week on Tuesday, which was kind of a bit of a bye week for us. And so we did a lot of Q&A, and the topic of conversation was really honed in around projects. So last week, what we did is we kind of went through basic project settings. Unfortunately, that one did not make it out to Facebook, though I do believe the Zoom recording was going to be posted out there. So if you're looking at just kind of understanding the base level settings of the project board, excuse me, that one should be live for you guys to take a look. Well, not live, but should be posted out on our Facebook page for you guys to take a look at. If not, let me know. I'll make sure that we get that up there for you. So today's primary focus is going to be around building and using projects. So we're going to start kind of more of a basic level, but I encourage everybody to ask questions throughout. I am actually opening up the ability for everybody and anybody to unmute yourselves, join in the conversation. I love when you dialogue with me. We also have the Q&A box, so if you have questions you're more comfortable posting there, I encourage you to do it through the Q&A box as well as the chat box. So many means of getting your questions addressed today. So before we dive in, does anybody have any specific questions that they want me to address that they came here kind of really hoping to get some answers to today? And then from there, we'll start diving into getting things up and running in a project. And I'll give you guys a moment to type in those questions here. I apologize. I'm trying to keep an eye on the comments coming through potentially for Facebook Live as well, but it seems that when I click that, the audio comes through as well. So bear with me here. I'm still trying to get, there we go. Okay, so if you're watching through Facebook, please feel free to put your comments in Facebook as well. So I've got all of the comment areas open. All right. So it looks as though we don't have any questions coming in at the moment. Let me just verify our Q&A box. Nothing coming in at the moment. So let's go ahead and get on with talking through our projects. So bear with me one moment. I'm going to get a screen share going for all of you. All right. Okay, so if you could just either by a show of hands or give me some, likes or hearts if you're on Facebook, if you guys can see my screen so that I know that everybody can see everything. Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, great. So I am going to go ahead and start walking through this. I just want to move my Facebook page over here so that I can kind of keep an eye on if we have any comments pop in there as well. All right, so if I miss comments, I apologize. I'm going to try and bounce back and forth, but I'm just watching a couple of different platforms with that right now. So let's go ahead and dive in. Projects. So our project board is going to live in the project module here. And you have your My Projects, and then you have your project board as a whole. And the difference is in this scenario is My Projects is only going to show you what you're assigned to or what you're managing. The project board, if your permissions and your security roles inside of ConnectWise allows for it, will show you every project for the company. Okay, so if I come here to the project board, I don't think we have really anything in here. Nope, just one. I'm going to get the same result whether I click on project board or My Projects because it's our sandbox. But if I had 10 different projects in here that I was not the project manager of, they would all show here and I'd be able to see them all. Again, you do have to have that permission open up to you inside of your security roles and manage. But if I only wanted to see stuff I was responsible for, whether I'm the technical resource, the project manager, administratively, financially, I'm looking at this and need to keep an eye on that, that would be the time to go into this because it keeps that view a little bit more narrow for you. So to create a project, we can get there several different ways. Can I just see a show of hands or some likes about how many of you today are using opportunities and converting through opportunities to get to your next stage, whether that's a sales order, a project, a service ticket, whatever that looks like. Okay, so I only have one member right now that's doing that. So if that's something that you want to learn more about and understanding the sales process, we can definitely have a ConnectWise Manage call around that as well. But let's go ahead then and just do it, creating it strictly from the board. So we're not going to do it through a conversion process because it feels like the majority of you are not using that today. So if I come into My Projects, I can create it, but just by clicking the plus here. Now I can also drop down this new function here, and I can say from here, I want a new project. That'll open that up in a new tab for me. I'm in a browser right now, but if you were in your local ConnectWise Manage client, that would also open up in a new tab in the ConnectWise client as well. In addition, if I were in my company, so I'm going to come to the XYZ Test Company here. I can come to my Projects tab here, and I can click the plus sign. And the nice thing about doing it from this part right here is that it's going to auto-populate the client information for me, so I don't have to go in and search for that. My preferred method is generally anything I create specific for a client I do through the company profile. You find your preferred method that works well for you. Matt, I do not use it that way now, but plan to. Okay, Matt, we are definitely going to help get you there for sure. So that's to come for you. So I love that you're here and you're getting a sneak preview on what's coming up in your implementation, but we will train you through how to do that conversion process as well. And how many of you here, just kind of show of hands or likes, are using Cell today, like ConnectWise Cell? There we go. I got a couple hands going up there. Okay, so a couple of you are. Perfect. So if you are using Cell and you're not using that conversion process, we need to have a conversation because that conversion process is really heavily integrated into what you're doing with Cell as well. Cell is the third Tuesday of every month. So let's see, that would be, I went to say, let's see, 14 days, so the 28th. 28th will be when we're going through Cell. So please join me for that one, and we can talk a little bit about workflow at that time as well if you guys want. So you guys drive the conversations. I'll come in with a plan, but drive the conversation with me, okay? All right. So coming back into our projects here, and let me just make sure I have this chat box visible on the screen in case you guys are seeing anything in chat and I'm missing it. Give me 1 second here. There's just so many different places to navigate. I apologize, guys. I will get this whole social media piece down one of these days. All right, I've got them all up. I think we're good now. Okay, so when we create our project, like I said, if we create it from the company screen, it's going to auto-fill in this information, this pod right here. All right, just like our service tickets, our agreements, pretty much everything in ConnectWise, these pods are purely customizable in terms of the order in which they're laid out on your screen. So if you're not so keen on having it here and you want it up here, I can move the company information up here. Whatever you do to reorder your screen is going to stay that way. And just know that this stays within your own view. This is not going to impact anybody's view but your own, okay? So we're gonna give your project a name. We're just gonna call this our test project. For those of you that are doing conversion process, your project name is by default going to be whatever your opportunity name is, unless you tell it to be something different. So for sake of consistency for what you guys see, if you haven't moved your pods around, the next pod here is going to be our project pod, okay? So it's gonna start off automatically in the new status, and we have our estimated start and end date. A lot of times, because these fields are pre-populated, they get overlooked. For anybody that's doing project management and converting into these projects, I'm going to encourage you to take a moment and take a step back when creating your projects and try and remember, even if you got to put a Post-it note up there, to make sure that we're populating our estimated and start and end dates accurately. By default, it's going to put in today's date, and then it's going to give you 30 days to the end. Some projects might take 30 days, some projects might not, some projects might only be 2 weeks long. In addition, more times than not, when we're creating our project, it's not actually starting the date that we created it, right? And it all depends and goes back to what your internal project handoff process is to determine kind of with that knowledge of saying, you know, this is starting in a week, this is starting tomorrow, whatever that looks like, make sure that your date is reflecting that, because this is going to help drive a timeline. So you guys can really plan out your resources adequately and see what is our bandwidth, right? One of the great things about using something like a project module as opposed to just a specific service ticket or a series of service tickets is that you can pre-plan, and projects are really all about pre-planning. It's more of a proactive nature that possibly stemmed from a reactive state, right? Something broke, something's on the verge of breaking, or it could just be time for a refresh. You know, so, but by default of what a project really is, the nature of it is proactive. So we should be scheduling it as such. And a good solid project plan should allow us to do so. Doing that then will give you the ability to budget your resources and planning so you guys can give accurate project timelines to your clients and say, you know what, you're going to sign off on this now, but right now, our estimated lead time is going to be 2 to 4 weeks, right? Because that's when we know we're going to have the bandwidth to be able to actively work on it and make sure that we're successful and we're not also dropping the ball on other projects because we're kicking off a new project without necessarily having the resources to do it. We're setting good expectations during the sales process that's going to take us there, okay? So coming back into our project here, we're going to say that this is going to begin on, say, the 14th. We did a little, call it a little love project here. And this one is, I'm anticipating it's a bigger project. It's going to take us about 2 months to complete it. So I'm going to put in an estimation end date of 3/15, okay? Well, maybe we'll make that 3/16 because I don't want to end on a Sunday. I don't know about all of you, not really feeling the working on Sunday. All right. Dependencies. Show of hands, how many of you know what dependencies are, or like, love on Facebook for those of you, since you can't do show of hands, if you know and understand what dependencies inside of a ConnectWise project are. All right, so I think globally we have a lot to learn on the dependency side. So in projects, oftentimes we're working in stages and something must happen before we can move on to the next stage. That's what we call a dependency. Ticket A must be completed for ticket B to begin. So you can link those inside of ConnectWise. And when you link those, you can set parameters in place that say you can't start this ticket until ticket A is done. Ticket B is the dependent ticket. Ticket A is the independent ticket. So what this is saying is if we set those parameters, we want to see that show up on the work plan. Since we have that area of opportunity for growth and knowledge, we are definitely going to work with that today. But now that we have our dates in place, before we even get into all of this, I actually want to skip a beat and step on down to our billing and finance information. Seems a little out of sync, but it'll make sense here in just a moment. This project board right here, I am going to drop this down and I'm going to select projects. When I select projects, this in turn will actually pre-populate what we've set as our defaults on our project board. So I don't have to go through and check all of those because I said by default I want these when I set up my project board. So I said if I'm using dependencies, show them on my work plan. Show my estimates on my work plan. Now, this might be a project that doesn't include dependencies. I can always uncheck that, but we want our defaults to come into place first, okay? This notes box is an internal notes. I traditionally like to use this more for like a shortened version of your scope of work. If you're in the conversion process, whatever you put in your opportunity notes section will translate over to this page. So this will give you some good insight about as to what you're doing. Just a quick high level. So I'm going to type something in here. All right. So now we have just some general notes in there. So anybody who's going in and kind of looking at the projects, if you can't tell just from the project name, it gives you a little bit more insight. And like I said, a good shortened scope of work, just kind of minimal, is usually pretty helpful for that as well. All right, so our company, we want to make sure that our primary company information is accurate. If you went to the profile to do it, then you know for sure it is. Otherwise, also making sure that the site that it's pertaining to is accurate. So for those of you that are working with clients that are multi-site, if your project pertains to a different location, just make sure you drop this down here and select the location that they're associated to. This helps in when you're building out your project tickets to being able to make sure if you're on site that your technicians or your project resources are also getting the proper address being sent to them in the ticket so that they know that they're going to the right location. There aren't any questions, hiccups, mess ups in there. Okay. Our time approvers. So for those of you, show of hands, how many of you are working right now with second tier time approval, where your project manager is also responsible for approving time that's being put against projects? All right, good. So we've got a couple of you right now, so that's really good. So this time approver, we're going to want to make sure that we take a moment and select the time approver. So I'm going to be my own time approver here so that the system knows who to route that time to on that second tier approval. If you're not using it today, it's something to grow into as you have a designated project resource. If you're also the project manager and the time approver, you're just creating extra steps for yourself. So you're probably approving that in your original time approval process. But when you get a designated project manager that you hold responsible for the timeline, budget, and the scope of the project, it's going to be important that they're approving that time. Additionally, if somebody other than the default expense approver is responsible for your projects, you want to select that person as well. I'm going to say that even though the project is mine to own, I'm not going to own the expense approval process. I'm going to leave that with my financial department. So I'll leave that blank and not fill anybody in. Our budget analysis. So here's a couple of different scenarios for this. Our budget analysis says I can use actual hours or I can use billable hours. So in actual hours, what we want 90% of the time, I think, would be considered actual hours. That says how many hours they're putting in, whether we consider it billable or not billable to the project. 90+% of your time that you put against a project should be reflected as billable without question, okay? But if you have time that's non-billable, you still want to count that against your budgeted hours and what you planned for inside of your project. When we're planning projects as far as the sales process is concerned, we should be incorporating our billable and non-billable time into that. So I typically recommend budget analysis is reflected via actual hours. Now, there are instances where billable hours are really what you're going to be focused on, and you're doing more of a fixed fee. So for instance, we work with, many of you know, we work with ConnectWise directly through an Advantage program, and we do, fixed fee projects with them. And I will realize my projects based off of billable time, because sometimes I choose to put time against a project that I want to be not billable because it's from, I'm doing it as my own kind of help out to the client, and I don't want it to count against their budget because those budgets are very strict. So that's where it makes good sense to say just based on budget. That being said, it's not, there's no right or wrong way, okay? Just understand that what you're putting in there and how you're delivering that and measuring that needs to be in consideration from a costing perspective for you and your organization, okay? So I'm gonna use actual hours for our example here, and I'm gonna put in my estimated hours. We're gonna say that we're estimating 50 hours, and I wanna use it as a budget. So this way it'll drive us to that as we're scheduling and putting time against it. It'll show up on the face of our project as well, so we can see how we're trending towards that 50 hours. Our finance piece here of restricting down payment to project. This is highly recommended for everybody. It's one of those settings that if you never use it, you're not going to notice any difference. But if you don't check that box, the first time that you need to use it by, say you create a down payment invoice, if you don't check that box for this project, those funds will be applied every other place inside of ConnectWise for this client. It'll just continue to, every invoice will get applied to those funds. An example would be if I'm charging, let's say, $5,000 for this project, and in that $5,000, I said you had to put $1,000 as the down payment to begin the project. If I don't say restrict down payment to this project, then I'm going to have an open invoice out there for $1,000. ConnectWise is going to see that as available funds. So if on top of my project, I'm also doing managed services with you, and shortly after your deposit invoice goes out, you have, your monthly invoice for managed service goes out, and let's say that that's $500 per month. It's going to see that $1,000, it's going to apply 500 of it to its open invoice, and it's going to send your client a paid $500 invoice. So when we get to the finalization of closing out our project, where that project should be all paid off, or it should be $4,000, not $5,000, the system's going to see it only has $500 left of that original down payment and apply that, and you're going to get an invoice for $4,500. Your client is going to not be happy about that. They'll say, I gave you a $1,000 down payment, I expect only to pay $4,000. And there's not going to be that actual realization behind it that says, oh, wait, you also gave me a $500 paid invoice on my monthly recurring. So save yourself the pain, the headache, the frustration for your client side. Always make sure that that box is checked, because like I said, if you never send a down payment invoice, no big deal. It doesn't hurt anything for it to be checked, but the second that that's not checked and you do, you'll feel the pain from that down the road, okay? So it's a really important setting to have. Bill this project only after it has been closed tells the system if I'm doing phased billing or I'm only billing when my project is completed, I want that checkbox checked. If I'm doing progress invoicing, a show of hands or likes, who knows what progress invoicing is when it comes to projects? All right, I got good. I got a couple of you. This is Stephanie. She's my counterpart here. Amazing. This is like her favorite way to bill invoices for projects. I'm a phased biller. I love billing out by phases. So progress invoices, for those of you that are not familiar, say I'm going to build a project as it goes, whether it's a fixed fee or whether it is an actual time and material, or whether it's a not to exceed. As I go through, I'm going to periodically, once a month, once a week, whatever that looks like, I want to be able to send an invoice on any work that progressively has been done already. So as far as that's concerned, you want to make sure if you're doing progress invoicing that that checkbox is open. Now, alternatively, what that is going to do is that's going to always show an open available invoice inside of your invoicing module. So whether you're the person that's responsible for invoicing on your team, or you have an accounting person or another member of your team that fills that function and role, if you're doing progress invoicing and you're not checking that box, it is very important that you have a good solid process around notifying that accounting person of when it's appropriate to invoice and not invoice. Because by the time that it's sitting in their queue, we always train that the finance person, all they have to do is look at their queue and know if it's there, it's good to go. The project side of this, when you're doing progress invoicing, is kind of that catch-22 exception to the rule. So I ask that if you are doing progress invoicing, you like the concept of it, that you build a good solid process around that lets your finance person or the person responsible for invoicing know when it's appropriate for them to invoice it. If you have questions on that and you need maybe a little bit of guidance with that, again, get in touch with us. Progress invoicing is Stephanie's wheelhouse here. She's amazing with it. She probably really have some good conversation with you guys around that process from as far as the invoicing is concerned. So we are going to go ahead and we're going to uncheck that or keep that checked for right now because, like I said, my preferred method is phased billing. And so we'll get a little bit further into that. Show of hands, how many of you guys are using Customer Portal or have your clients engaged with the ConnectWise Customer Portal today? You could do the likes on the Facebook as well. All right, so it doesn't appear as though many, if any, are, and that's perfectly okay. So this setting just removes this from the portal if you've opted to display projects on the portal. If you say, I don't want them to see this one, okay. All right, so now our actual billing information. We have several different options here. We have actual rates, fixed fee, not to exceed, and override. So what does all of this mean? The actual rates are, I'm gonna bill you what my work roles are designated as far as what their rates are. Fixed fee is I'm going to bill you a set amount. It doesn't matter if it takes me 1 hour or if it takes me 100 hours, you're going to be billed the same amount regardless. Not to exceed says, I am going to bill you time and material. I believe this project's going to take X amount of time, but I'll tell you what, if it goes over that amount, I'm not going to invoice you overage. So an example of that would be as if we're coming in with this 50 hours and we are saying that I'm going to build a cushion in for myself to make sure that I'm in a good place, okay? So I can say this $5,000 project, I'm going to say I won't exceed 6,000, right? So I think that this should take us, we should be able to get this done in about 50 hours. But you know, anything that goes over $6,000, I'm not going to invoice you for. That's what a not to exceed is. And so if you're using not to exceed, you're billing time and material all the way up into that point. Now, if you exceed $6,000 worth of revenue, the project's going to stop billing. Okay, so not to exceed is kind of that nice medium between having fixed fee and time and material. So if your clients kind of balk a little bit at the fixed fee, then that would be kind of that nice balance to go into. Jonathan has a question here. Bear with me one moment, Jonathan. I'm going to pull up your comment. It was partially cut off on my screen, so give me just one moment here. I have an override % complete on mine, but I don't see that on yours. Oh, that's because I have not saved the project yet. Once I save the project, then you'll be able to see that. Right now, it's still in its setup phase, so it's not actually looking at the percentage to complete just yet. All right, so we're going to go ahead. We're going to call this a fixed fee, and I'm going to do it a fixed fee for $5,000. Okay. And our billing start date. So our billing start date traditionally is just going to be the date that you kicked off your project. If you're trying to bill before that start date, though, it will prevent invoicing, so just keep that in mind. If you say that my billing start date is going to be in line with my start date of my project being February 14th, I can't send, the system won't send an invoice before then. So if I try and send like a progress invoice out of here or like a down payment invoice off of the project, it's going to say I can't do that just yet. So make sure that your billing start date lines up with when you want to send your first invoice from the project, okay? So in this case, I'm just going to cover myself, and I'm going to say my billing start date is February 1st. So bill time. I practice the idea that we are traditionally taking the route of building out ConnectWise on the back end to distinguish what kind of time we view to be billable versus non-billable. So I typically, in more cases than not, will say, leave this as no default. There are two exceptions to the rule, that is projects and agreements, because 90+%, probably closer to 95 to 99% of your time against projects that are like all-inclusive project, or all-inclusive invoice agreements. Wow, I can't speak today. All-inclusive agreements, tongue-tied. Those should always, your time should always be billable. If you're selecting that agreement, it should be billable to that agreement. That should be costed against there. Likewise, I'm doing a fixed fee project here. So in a fixed fee project scenario, I'm going to say that by default, I want my time billable. Now, that being said, if I'm doing like a T&M project where I'm billing actual rates, or I'm doing a not to exceed, I may just leave my no default in place. But if I'm doing fixed fee, I want all time billable against that fixed fee, unless there's a legitimate exception there. If there's a legitimate exception there, I can take that, right? And you can take that on a case-by-case basis. But the majority of your time should be in a billable capacity against that fixed fee because it's fixed fee work, right? So to make sure we're capturing that cost so we know that we made the right margins on the project, or so that we know that we're able to say, you know, we didn't make the right margins. What did we do wrong? Was there an area that we didn't take into consideration? What can we do better in the quoting stage? What can we do better in the rollout stage? Things of that nature, okay? Products by default are always going to be billable, and expenses, again, if it's fixed fee, we're going to have it billable to the fixed fee. In this case, we just leave it as no default, and we're going to let the expense itself default the way that it should. If your project is covered by an agreement, and that could be a block of hours agreement, like a bot agreement, that could be your managed services. So managed services, all-you-can-eat platforms do include certain agreements or certain projects. So if your project is one of those that's covered by an agreement, this is where we would select it at that time. Now, keep in mind, if you're working with a fixed fee, as opposed to billing actual, which is T&M, this agreement has to also be able to absorb money, which means it has to be an amount-based agreement, not a time-based agreement. So show of hands if you all know what I'm talking about there, if you're kind of following along with that, or like on the Facebook so that I can see that. I got no hands, so I'm going to assume that I've confused you. When you set up your agreement parameters allows you to select amount, hours, or incidents. If your agreement is set for hours, like a block of hours, and you just selected hours and said you're getting 10 hours, you cannot apply a fixed fee project to it because it needs a dollar value to be able to detract from, okay? If you have it set to amount, then it'll apply a dollar amount appropriately and bill anything that's over from that. All right, so we're going to say no agreement here because I like to bill additional revenue for my projects. And our location, our department, and our board are all defaulted based off of what we have previously selected on our projects board when we set that up. Our ship-to company, if this is different, oh, you don't know how to show a hand. So in Facebook, Jonathan, you can just hit the like. The like button is just kind of my indication that, okay, somebody there is kind of raising their hand. The show of hand otherwise is in Zoom. I don't know if you're in Zoom. In your, I want to say it's in your menu bar, you can raise a hand. All right, so your shipping company, you just want to make sure that this and your location, if you're shipping product, all lines up accordingly. And then same with your bill too. By default, this should all be selected based off of who your primary contact, your bill to contact is that you have listed in ConnectWise. So if for this project it's supposed to be going to somebody else, make sure that you have that selected appropriately. And if you don't know who the billing contact is, I'm going to urge you to revisit your sales to operations handoff, because by the time you're building a project, you should have that. Oh, you don't have a Zoom link. I believe there is a Zoom link posted in the event for ConnectWise, in the event for Facebook. Let me see if I've got a Zoom link in here that I can provide you. Looking. Invite. Copy URL. Okay, hold on, Jonathan. It is coming. For any of you that want to hop on via Zoom, here is the link. There you go. Sorry about that. Perfect. Okay. So coming back in here, we have our baseline set. We can hit the save button. And now we have our projects. So Jonathan, that percentage to complete that you mentioned that you didn't see on my screen is right here. So this is where I can manually say it's 10% complete if I wanted to. We control this aspect and that, that gauge on the project board for those of you that weren't on last week's call. Again, if it's not posted, let me know, and you'll see in the project board settings where to find that at. So you can tell the system whether to gauge it based off of actual versus billable hours, total, actual hours versus total hours, actual phases closed versus total amount of phases, or the amount of tickets closed versus total amount of tickets. Or you can say manual, I want to calculate my own percentage to complete. Okay, so this is what the face of our project looked like. And that 50 hours, because I said use as budget, will show here. So on a project dashboard, just kind of right out the gate, some of the things that you get as you start working your project is the ability to see how many hours you've put against the project from an actual percentage, how many of those were budgeted, so you can kind of watch that meter fill and kind of gauge where you're at. And then how many of those hours that you actually put in there were scheduled, okay? This says I have 40 days left remaining in my project, okay? All right, so let's get to the meat and potatoes of this. Now that we're through those basic settings, we're here now in our work plan. So our work plan is kind of where the magic happens in our projects, all right? So projects are a compilation of phases, tickets, and tasks. So phase one, we're just gonna say maybe project management. And just typing it in just like this, I hit the enter key, it's going to create the phase, and it's going to drop this down here so that we have the ability to create a new ticket. I can say I'm not necessarily ready to create tickets and I want to create a new phase instead, and it'll allow me to continue doing it that way. What's nice about this is as we build out our project, if you're one of those people that like, I just like to get a plan on the paper and then I'm going to go back in and fill in the details, this is perfect for that. It allows you to just kind of get that plan down. Once you have a good plan in place, you can actually save it as a template. And then from there, you can reapply that plan over and over again. Okay, so that might be another call, another day that we can do that. We got about 20 minutes left, so I want to get you guys through working a project, and then we can continue project as a series if you guys would like to continue doing that on next month's Manage call. Okay, and again, if this is an area that you think you can use more assistance with, just reach out to us as well. So I'm just going to put ticket 1, hit enter. And then it's going to create that next level. I'm going to say ticket 2. And I'm just going to put 2 tickets in this phase. And then I'm going to create a new phase. So maybe this is now my configuration phase. Now I'm going to call this pre-planning / discovery phase, right? And I'll have 1 ticket in that. I'm just going to call it ticket 3 so that it's distinguishable. Then I can come here to my next phase. I just drop this down, phase 4, and we're going to call this configuration. And maybe I've got 2 tickets in here, ticket 4, ticket 5. And we're going to create one more phase, and we're going to call this implementation, right? And I'm going to call this ticket 6 and ticket 7. Okay. So I have my basic outline, all right? And we can start building upon the basic outline and distinguishing. We know that we have 50 hours that we're budgeting for our project. So how did we divide that time up? What do those 50 hours really translate into? So I can come into this, and this is what I like about the ConnectWise project work plans, is I can make these adjustments right in here. So let's say ticket 1, I anticipate it's going to be about 2 hours. Ticket 2, we'll say it's going to be 3 hours. So now I have 5 hours of my 50 in total that's planned out for my project management phase, okay? Now I'm going to come into my pre-planning, and maybe I understand that my pre-planning is going to require an additional day of on-site discovery that kind of allows for us to get some pre-configurations underway. Maybe we're doing firewalls, that's pulling out, extracting different config files from there in preparation for bringing that on board to the new equipment. So I'm going to go ahead and give that one 8 hours. So now we'll see that we have 13 of our 50 already budgeted for, okay? So now in our configuration stage, I'm going to say this one's 4 hours, and this one is 4 hours, and now we're at 21 hours. So I still technically have another 29 hours. I probably won't budget for all 50. Maybe we will. I'll give 16 hours here and another 5 hours here. So let's do like 2 days of on-site, and then maybe like 5 hours of maybe post-implementation support, those troubleshooting, remediation, things that happen to come up in every project, right? So now we can see, oh, I didn't get us there. I lied. I'm still 8 hours short. So we're going to keep that 8 hours. We'll add in one more phase, because this is, after all, a fixed fee, right? So let's call this, I like to call it IML, which also stands for Issue Management Log. Now, I will tell you, full transparency, this is more old school ConnectWise before they brought on the Issues tab, right? I still have a tendency to go into an issue management log because I like the ability to work everything directly from the work plan. The Issues tab is phenomenal because it'll associate it with its proper phase up here, whereas my Issues management log does not. So there's definitely some pros to using that. You do not have to follow my outline here. I just like all my workable tickets in one spot. You can see with issue tickets, I'll actually show you an example of an issue ticket. You can see when we create it that it's going to want a phase to be assigned to, and it'll show up kind of as a shadow box inside of that phase, but I can't actually work it in that ticket, or work it from the work plan, I apologize. So as you see here, I go to save and it says, okay, tell me what phase this belongs to. So I could say that this belongs to, I can keep it in my IML if I want to, or I can say that this came out of our configuration phase, and I can say kind of where I want it at. We're just going to leave it right there and hit save. So now our issue ticket exists here in our issue log. And what's great about this, and again, just kind of showing you, I tend to have some old school habits, so some things, just old tricks, they die hard. But this is kind of a really cool feature that ConnectWise has brought into the projects, because I can print this issue log and I can deliver this to my client, okay, and have just these tickets on there that shows them these are the things that came up throughout the project, these are the things that we resolved, and it gives you the ability then to kind of see those inside your work plan. As you can see here, it shows up in my work plan. It'll show the number of how many hours we worked, and even though it's not technically part of our budget, it will populate our hours worked here so that we can see how we came in on the total. So it will show us when we go over our budgeted amount for the phase because there were problems that we didn't plan for. So there are some really big pros to doing the issues log. Again, I just prefer to have it. I can't work that from here, right? In order for me to work it, if I'm in my work plan, I have to come into my issues tab and then I can actively work that ticket. Okay. Another place that it shows up in is the My List. If you're not familiar with the My List, I definitely recommend that you have the My List, review it. It's under sales, actually, in My List. It shows you all of your tickets. So if you wear many hats in your organization, My List is a beautiful place. It'll show you activities, opportunities, service tickets, problem tickets, like trouble tickets for projects, as well as project tickets all in one place, okay? So there's a couple different ways. Just for sake of our example here, I'm going to use my issue management log and say that I'm planning for about 8 hours worth of troubleshooting. Oh, I need to put a ticket in here, sorry. And just kind of resolving some additional issues. And this is just so I can get to my 50. It didn't like that. Oh, that's why. There we go. Okay. This one I can delete. All right. So now we're at 58. Oh, I'm so confused. How did that happen? 5, 16, 29. Maybe I was at 50. Let's refresh. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so we have our budget in place. So again, projects are about proactively scheduling. So you don't want to just have this budget here and not schedule towards it. You don't want to just go to the lead tech, okay, here's your baby, go, because that makes it really hard to manage and to monitor the progression of it. So these should all be scheduled entries for them. So even for your project manager, if you have a project management, maybe that 2 hours here is for our kickoff call as well as our project planning, then I would say that, you know, I'm going to move our resources pad up so I don't have to keep scrolling down. So I'm going to be the one that's scheduled. So I'm going to say schedule me, and I'm going to do this on the 14th. I'm going to say I expect to spend an hour for our project kickoff call. So let's say from 10 to 11. Save and new. And then directly after that, I need to do some project planning based off of our findings from our kickoff call. So I'm going to schedule myself again. And that's also going to be the 14th, but I'll say that I'm going to schedule it from 2 to 3, not 2 to 5, 2 to 3, and save. So what that's going to do for us here is it's going to show us that we have 2 hours budgeted. We have 2 hours scheduled. Currently, we have no time against it, okay? So I'm going to just throw in just 3 hours of scheduling on this ticket. Schedule me, let's say on the 20th from 10 to 3 hours to 1, save, come back out. All right, and now pre-planning, we know, needs to be done before we can move on to configurations. Here's where we're going to start working on dependencies, okay? So if I come into ticket number 4, and I click that, I have this field right here that's called predecessor. Our predecessor is the independent ticket, and we're about to make this a dependent ticket. And what's great about projects is that our predecessor does not have to be an actual ticket. So if I have a phase as a whole that needs to be done, and we're saying our pre-planning phase needs to be done before we can move into configurations. So I would come here and select this, and I would say phase 2 needs to be done. Now, right now I'm seeing it's dependent on it. It'll still let me work it if it's not done. However, if I check this box and I say that this must be closed in order to start the next ticket, I will not be able to begin this ticket until I close phase 2, and I'll demonstrate that for you as well. Now, lag time says that if there's a certain amount of wait time that we have to do. So sometimes we have these projects where we know that we need to let something settle in before we can move on to the next stage, or we know that there's transfer time before we can move on to the next stage. So that lag time allows us to hold ourselves accountable to that, so that we're not trying to jump in too soon and not complete the project at the rate that we're supposed to with the level of accuracy and completion that we're looking for. Okay, so how are we all coming along through this? I know we're talking through a lot. Any questions so far? You guys have all been pretty quiet through this. Any questions, definitely just pop them in the comments box, pop them in the chat box, pop them in your Q&A box. I'm happy to answer any that you might have. Yeah, it is, Matt. It's a ton of information. So it's like drinking from a waterfall. All right, so I'm not going to put any lag time in here. I don't think we need any lag time. So I'm going to leave that just as is and hit save, okay? So now I'm going to go ahead and hit save and close. And so when I say show me dependencies on my work plan, this is what I'm referencing right here, okay? So now just looking at the work plan, I can see that in order to move on with phase 3, ticket 111, I have to complete phase 2. And that lock option tells me that phase 2 has to be closed before I can work on it, okay? So for anybody here that's finding that things might be getting done out of order, out of sync, and we're really trying to drive a solid project process so that we can deliver the best client experience with the highest level of quality, this is going to revolutionize how you do projects. So if you're not using this today, I urge you, practice with it, talk to your team about it, get your resources on board, because if you just start doing this and you don't really tell them what's going on, you're probably going to tick them off and really frustrate them. Let them see and understand the value behind what you're doing and why you're doing it. Okay, so now if I were to come in and try and work ticket number 4, and I just want to put in, first and foremost, if I don't see this up here, because this is really small, it says right here, predecessor must be closed. Ticket 111 is linked to a predecessor in an open status. You must close the predecessor or deselect the predecessor must be closed before successor can start checkbox. Okay. So it's not going to let me do anything with this ticket. I'm going to just put it into in progress and hit save. Okay, now I'm going to put in a time entry. Oh, Sarah, it's exciting, isn't it? It's very revolutionary. I love it. You got to have a right use case for it, though. You can't just kind of throw it into everything and anything at once. Like without the right use case, it's just painful. Sorry, this kind of went off my screen and I'm trying to bring it back on my screen for you guys so you can see the full. Here we go. Okay. So now you can see here, I'm trying to put in a time entry. I want to work this ticket. I've put it in progress. I should be good to go. But I could put some notes in. I cannot put a start time. I cannot put an end time. And it repeats again. The predecessor is not closed, and we said the predecessor has to be closed. So this completely prevents us from being able to move forward without first taking care of phase 2, okay? So I'm gonna go backwards and go back to my phase 2. And before I close this, I had mentioned I'm a big fan of phased billing. So show of hands or likes inside of Facebook if you are familiar with what phased billing is. We can't see the pop-up for time. Oh, goodness, I am so sorry. Sarah, thank you, or Elizabeth, thank you for telling me that. I am going to reshare really quick here. Bear with me, I'm gonna stop my share. Stop share. And now we will reshare. Screen 2, share. All right, let me go back in there so that you guys can see that. And, you know, if you guys all kind of raised your hands, I apologize I didn't see. So I'll just kind of touch base on what phased billing is. Let me get my Q&A box back up, get my chat box back up. Okay. So coming back here, what I was showing you is if I come in here and I click the time entry box, which for some reason just continues to want to go off my screen. Here we go. Okay, you'll see here, I can't put in a start time. I can't put in an end time. It doesn't matter that my ticket is in progress. I can't do anything with it because I'm locked out until the phase is actually closed before it, the predecessor prior to is closed. Okay, because this is so solely dependent upon that, and that's what we told the project. So for those of you that aren't aware what phase billing is, I can say phase 2, I want to bill phase separately as a fixed fee, and maybe what I said is I'm going to invoice for a fixed fee of $5,000. I'm going to send you your first invoice of $1,500 after we complete the additional discovery phase in our pre-planning. I can make this be $1,500. Now, I do have to keep in mind that if I put this $1,500 in here, I do need to detract that from my original setup of a fixed fee of $5,000, so I'm not invoicing my client $6,500, okay? And I can say this phase can only be billed after it's been closed, or this phase can only be billed after the project's been closed, okay? So if this particular phase I wanted to do progress invoicing on, I would just leave that unchecked, and that $1,500 will show out there, okay? Again, if you're doing that, make sure you have a good process around it. I'm going to say it can only be invoiced after it's been closed, and because I put that here, I do need to navigate back to my finance tab, and once I'm in my finance tab, I need to change that $5,000 now to the $3,500 so that I am in total only billing my client for $5,000 in total per the fixed fee agreement that we did through the quoting process, okay? So if I come back into my work plan and I close this phase, which is going to be the last thing I do in the project before we close out for the day, because we only have 2 minutes left, I now can go into my ticket here, and I can enter my time. And I can work this ticket just as I would any other ticket because the phase has now been closed. So dependents, if you're not using them and you see value in them, practice, 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 but also do it in a way that you can get your team on board and get them excited about it. Let them see the value. Otherwise, like I said, it's just going to feel like more of a pain. It is a very structured way to run your projects. So if you want to continue understanding more about projects in terms of the financial aspect of them, billing projects, we didn't really look at much with the invoicing side of things today, and kind of building out tasks, saving templates, we can have another call. I ask, send me an email. My email is rose@baringmckinley.com. You can shoot a comment through Facebook, whatever it is, just let me know, and I will make sure that for our March Managed Tuesday that we continue this process and just kind of do this series as we advance further into projects, and then we can kind of take maybe more advanced questions. If you do have questions specifically around anything, or you have any suggestions or ideas of topics you would like covered, please make sure you send them to me. Again, with our new format, first Tuesday of the month is Manage, second Tuesday is Automate. So next week you will all be here with Will for Automate if you're using the Automate tool or want to learn more about it. After that, we move into Sell will be the third Tuesday, and the fourth Tuesday is an industry spotlight. So on the rare occasion you got 5 Tuesdays, you get the Rose and Will show. All right, so I appreciate all of you being here and your time and your investment in your professions. We look forward to seeing you all again next Tuesday. Have a great day, guys.